Hi, it's Andy, and I'm here with my culture apple, which you can see has taken a bit of a turn for the worse from the apple's perspective since the last video. The daily videos this week have been a continuation of the sermon that I did on Sunday about leveling the playing field. And one of the things that I am doing right now is beginning to look at the culture of our church. And one of the books that I am using to help guide me in this process is a book called Look Before You Lead by Aubrey Malphurs. And he uses the idea of an apple as the culture apple and the various layers of the apple to help us to dig into the different layers of a congregation. Well, the outer layer, the skin, which you can see there's just a little sliver left at this point, is the expressions. It is what we do. The flesh of the apple is that is the values. That is what we value, and we do what we value, or we don't do what we don't value. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, there are certain things that we think we should value that we don't do, and those are called aspirational values. For instance, I don't think anybody would dispute, any Christian would dispute that we should be making disciples, that we should be telling others about Jesus, that we should be doing a lot of things. But if we're not doing those, then we aspire to do those, but we're not doing them, so they are simply in the values, not in the expression. They are aspirational. But if we dig into the innermost part, and I just left, hopefully you can see the seed right there. We know what the core of the apple is. It is the inner part of the apple. And the core, as it's related by Malphurs, is our beliefs. See, we do what we value, but we value what we truly believe. And therefore, ultimately, we do what we believe, but there is that middle step. And the thing about the core, it's the innermost part, therefore it is the most difficult to change. See, you can change an apple on the outside. I have changed the appearance of this apple greatly since I started in the first video a couple of days ago. But I have not changed that this is an apple. And indeed, even if I destroyed this apple and I took the seed out and I threw it into the ground, another apple may grow from it. Several apples may grow from that. So changing the innermost part is the most challenging. Changing the beliefs is most challenging. And that's okay. Because a church's core beliefs sets its culture. But here's the thing about beliefs. Beliefs are not always true. In fact, if they were true, we would say they were facts, not beliefs. And so, with that, we do have several beliefs. We have several doctrines that we as a church might follow, that many churches, many organizations, many families might follow. But I'm not even talking about doctrine per se. I'm talking about beliefs such as, how long should a message be? How is this video getting too long? How about what communication techniques or tactics should a church use? What about the tradition of a church, the authority within the church? Those are things that are really beliefs that may or may not be based on fact. Oftentimes they are based upon opinion. But those beliefs, being the innermost part, control the culture of a church. They control what we do on the outside, whether or not they are really true. Now, again, if we're talking about core beliefs and we're talking about doctrine, we're talking about the Bible, then those beliefs should not be easily changed. Yes, there are things that we believe about the Bible that aren't true. We've talked about, that it was not an apple, for instance, that Adam and Eve ate. Genesis 1:29 says that you may eat from every fruit that is from a tree that has a seed. Well, I'm looking at the seed of this apple, so unless apples have grown a seed since the time of the garden, then it could not have been an apple. How many wise men were there? We don't know. They brought 3 gifts. We don't know how many there were. There's all kinds of things we believe, in part because of a hymn tells us, or a song tells us, not the Bible. But those doctrines from the Bible should not be easily changed if we're wrong. If we are right, I should say. If we are wrong, we do need to be willing to make accommodations for that change in our understanding. But there are things that we believe or assumptions that we make that control a church as well. For instance, what type of music should a church have? The Bible is not clear on that. In fact, the Bible, if anything, says, sing a new song unto the Lord. It says similar language to that many times. Does that mean that we only sing new songs and not old songs? I don't think that's what that means. But it does mean that we need to express ourselves differently to God over time and not be stuck in our ways. Again, I would argue that not all assumptions are bad. You have an assumption that there will be church next week. You have an assumption of what time church will be next week. You have an assumption that there will be a video next week. Those assumptions are okay. There's nothing wrong with those. But again, those are mere assumptions. There is nothing in concretely saying that this will happen on Friday or Sunday or next week of any kind. So, sometimes those assumptions can keep necessary changes from happening. For instance, I would guess that no one would argue that COVID has not disrupted their life in some way. For some, that disruption has been greater than others. But whether that is the freedom to go into a store, whether that is family not being able to get together for a holiday, whatever it is, COVID has made a disruption in people's lives. And one such change that we made related to these videos is back a year ago, we discussed the idea of moving our Wednesday nights into an online venue. And we discussed it at the December business meeting. We discussed it at the March business meeting. And we determined at the March business meeting that it was not the time to do it. That's what the church voted, was it was not the time to do it. Well, 1 week later, COVID happened, and 2 weeks later, we were doing online on Wednesday. Now, that's not a point of pride. That's just a point of reality. And so I do think it's very ironic that we made an assumption, we had a belief, we had a value that this is what should be, and God said, there's something coming you don't know about. And so if we're not willing to change because we are so stuck in our mindsets, and let's face it, we can all get stuck in our mindsets. If I'm not willing to change, if we are not willing to change, then the culture of our church may not change when it needs to change. Again, I'm not talking about doctrine. The Bible has not changed in 2,000 years. If it was good enough for them, it's good enough for me. But how we process the Bible, how we apply the Bible in our lives, how we live out the Bible. The first century church didn't have pews, but we have pews today. The first century church didn't have microphones or cameras, and yet I'm using those today. When we start making the assumptions that this is the way it must be, even though the Bible doesn't declare it that way, that's when we have challenges. So yes, core values or core beliefs are important. They lead to the flesh. They lead to the values, and the values is essentially and effectively lead to the skin, the expressions of what we do. So as we go forward, it's not enough to just look at what we do. It's not just enough to look at what we value. Part of my objective during these months is to look even down to our core beliefs and determine the very why we value something, why we do certain things. I can't do that alone. But that was the message of Sunday. I need to look at this. I need to share this. I need to reflect upon these things with others. These others need to share it with others, and then we all need to respond in some way. That's going to be a little bit about the message in December's Hub Sunday. First, we're going to return to Romans 6 and cover Romans 6 in the first 3 weeks of December. But one of the things that we do need to look at, as I mentioned on Sunday, is if we are going to level the field. That's not just an expression. That's going to have to be at least a change in values, if not a change in our core beliefs. But we don't have to make it up. We can find evidence in the Bible for how other leadership structures have worked, even in the New Testament times. The question is it right for us? And that will be the message on Hub Sunday and the messages to follow, the videos to follow that week at the end of December. So I hope you'll join me there to see where we take this next as we think about expressions, the values, and ultimately our beliefs.